First of all, I'm going to talk a little, well, I'll give you a little quick roadmap. I'm going to talk about the importance of this sector from a Manitoba perspective, and I really want to emphasize the importance at this particular time. Secondly, I want to talk about some of the challenges that we've heard in government from people who work in the sector, and then finally talk about some of the things that we're trying to do. Martin's already alluded to a few of them, and also I think what some of the next steps are. In terms of the importance of the sector, our calculations, and these probably come from the research done by Professor Phillips, by Martin himself, is that the total funding for the nonprofit sector in Manitoba is somewhere between $3.5 and $4.5 billion. And that's commensurate, of course, with the statistic that Martin gave us that employment would be around 100,000. So, you know, it was really Martin who promoted the idea that this sector has to start thinking of itself as a sector. It's bigger than aerospace. It's bigger than agriculture. And once you start to think along those lines, then I think a lot of these things that are now surfacing become much more evident. In fact, almost self-evident. Is why aren't we thinking about what perpetuates it, about the challenges that people face in this sector? But to add to that, of course, as we're all aware, nonprofit organizations are huge parts of the quality of life in Manitoba, and they're very much relied upon by government to deliver services in health, in education, environmental policy, culture. I mean, you all will know from your own involvements just how much you do, or how much the organizations that you're involved with do to provide services to Manitobans, which otherwise would probably fall to government as a sole provider under the traditional model. So in a sense, the nonprofit sector extends the reach of what citizens can do, because it's not just going through government. It's something that bubbles up from the grassroots, often stays very close to the grassroots, and I think therefore is often more effective than what government agencies can do on our, as I called it, the traditional model. And that's an incredibly important part of what happens in this community, and also sometimes what doesn't happen if the gaps aren't filled in by either government or the nonprofit sector. Now, at this point in time, before I start talking about the challenges, just let me say, I think right now the nonprofit sector in our province is diverse, it's dynamic, it actually is entrepreneurial and innovative. I'm glad that Professor Phillips touched on this. From the government perspective, and I think in Britain they used, under Blair, they started to develop quite a bit of language looking at what they called joined up government. As I said, from the government perspective, the nonprofit sector extends the reach of what we can do. It leverages, it's true that we do quite a bit of funding for nonprofit sectors. I think about half of the funding that's raised is government, and most of that is provincial government. But for that, we enlist all kinds of volunteer energies, resources, the governance role itself of volunteer boards that are usually in charge of non-government organizations. So there's a sense in which it's another sort of extended arm of the public sector. Now, and I think that it's also very important, since Professor Phillips talked about innovation, to realize that if you look at the state organizations on the traditional model, if you provide a narrative in historical terms, most of the institutions that have now become part of the standard sort of array of government organizations started out as community organizations on the nonprofit model. So hospitals, universities, schools, all through the province gradually became absorbed into the public sector proper. But I think that narrative is still going on. And anywhere that there's an area where government hasn't quite got it right, or I mean, sociologists sometimes talk about the big sticky problems. I mean, you just have to look around you to know what they are in our society. The underclass, issues of children who don't get a proper education and are disadvantaged for most of their lives, the issue of the Aboriginal population in Manitoba. What you find is that there's a tremendous amount of innovation and different models or approaches to delivering services or addressing the problem that are being carried out by nonprofit sectors. And there's sort of a narrative in which, in a lot of cases, when something has been proved to work by an entrepreneurial nonprofit group, people who are very close to the grassroots, government will try and scale it up. And so the whole model of mentoring, for example, dealing with youth and with some of the issues in the Aboriginal population, very much an innovation pioneered by people within the nonprofit sector, increasingly now taken up and funded by government as just part of the array of government services. Now, having said that, though, what are the challenges? Martin's alluded to quite a few of them, and of course, because of our reliance on nonprofit organizations, we're almost reminded on a daily basis in government of what some of the challenges are. A lot of the organizations that we're talking about are small organizations, and right off the bat, there's a continual problem with capacity, to some extent with recruitment, but it's also, as Martin said, it's a problem that you'll get in any small organization of relying on a leadership group, sometimes an individual, as your animating force, and not being able to address issues of recruitment, of providing the full range of services that are needed, and even as I'll get to, in dealing with your main funders, with your other especially government that expects to have a certain standard of compliance with, say, financial accounting methods and so on, in return for funding. Secondly, and I don't think that this was touched on, but an aspect of that, the demographics in the nonprofit world are very similar to the way they are for government, except a little bit more worrying because you don't have, that stable structure of salary and recruitment agencies. A tremendous number of organizations in our community are seeing the really dominant people age out, and they're not picking up the people from the 20-somethings, the 30-somethings to replace those people who, in some cases, had founded or been a major part of the development of organizations. And that's something that we see and hear on a regular basis within government.